All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's form building webinar. My name is Nick, and I'll be taking us through the builder today. Just as a reminder, if you do have any questions, I will be turning that chat on a little bit later in the webinar, but I'll be happy to field any questions before we close up today and try to get all of those answered. But let's go ahead and jump right in. In the meantime, today we'll be talking about formatting sections and reformatting sections. Sometimes, depending on if you're not getting the information you want from the client and you don't necessarily want to have every single question required, it can help to just reformat a few things to make it the form flow a little bit better for your patient, ensuring that they fill out at least most of that information. But we'll just go ahead and jump into our FormDr training packet here at the top. We've gone to our Packets and Forms page, and we'll click those three dots on the right side of that packet and click Edit Forms to take us into the builder. This takes us to step one, where we can add or remove forms from the packet as tabs. I've already added a medical history page here, so we'll be working off that initially, but we'll go ahead and click Next to Build as we already have our tabs set up for today. On tab one, we have our information, our general patient information that we're collecting, and I have simulated a medical history on page 2. I haven't fleshed these out because we'll be moving a lot of them around. But first and foremost, all we have set up here is 20 single select option widgets inside of a column widget, which can be found in the formatting tools. And I have set that column to 5 wide. You can also update this as well. If you find that your answers, because they will be different sizes depending on the size of your question, right? So if it's just one word answers, then you can absolutely get that formatting nice and tight. You can go all the way up to 9 wide, but it will format from the top of that first word. So just keep that in mind. If you have something that's very large in a sea of shorter questions, then maybe that question can be pulled out if you want to keep that tight formatting. Otherwise, I would just recommend to shorten that up and, maybe give it a little bit more room to breathe depending on how long the other answers are. Another option here is to separate these two into separate sections, right? So what I mean by that is if we have, we'll add another column widget, and we'll have our yes or no question that we'll drag up in there. And then I'll just make this, let's make this say test. But this would just simulate a one-word answer type question: cancer, diabetes, whatever the case may be. Maybe we're asking the patient if they've had any of these in the past or something like that. But we can go ahead and duplicate that out just to simulate. All right. And then we'll go 5 wide here as well. So maybe we pull all of the one-word answers out of our initial column and we put them into a column of its own. And then we take our larger questions and we leave those in the second column. This way we can keep the tight spacing here if we want. And if we really need to let these breathe, maybe there's only 3 or 4 questions in that will need to be in that second column. And you can have that just to save time. We'll just add a new one. We'll add our long one. We'll delete our old one. And we'll duplicate our new one. And I'll change these up a little bit just to simulate a few different styles. But you can see that it will be dependent on how long that answer is. And I only point that out because this may not matter to you or your patients. However, if you prefer that form to be more visually consistent, I guess, we could always bring that down to that 2-column style. And since this is this is only one widget in a 2-column format, we don't have a 4th widget here to take up that space. So it's allowing this full sentence to breathe on one line. So it is allowing this one widget to take up that full space, even though the column is set to 2 wide, because the column will always format the final row to however many elements are within it. So if you have it set to 3 and we had 5 in here, then the top row would be set to 3, the bottom row would be set to 2 wide. So to piggyback on that, we can go ahead and use a group as a spacer if we want to take up that last element area to force this question to format with the rest of the group. I used the the 3 and 2 example just a moment ago. So we'll go ahead and do that. I can demonstrate that too. And this is simply what I meant by that. So we currently have this column set to 2 wide. If we set it to 3 wide, we'll have our 3 widgets on top, which are formatting to the column. Our 2 widgets on the bottom are formatting as if it was set to 2 wide there, because there's each given an equal share of the answer or of the form area. So we can use that group tool to take up that last space. And I like using the group tool because on its own, it's just an element that is used for formatting purposes. And we'll get into a little bit more about how we can use this to move things around tabs here in just a moment. But it can also be used as a spacer in your columns, because it is a widget itself, so it will take up that place, but it will not show anything for the patient on the forms when they're filling it out. It will just be a blank space there. However, everything else will be nice and formatted according to however you've set up your column. So we'll just go ahead and drag our group up into our column. And now these last 2 are formatted as if they were formatted to 1/3 of that area, since we have it set to 3. Let's go ahead and click next to style really quickly. We can go over to a live version of our form, and you can see here how that last space is just blank. The patient cannot interact with it. It won't do anything for them. It's simply just going to take up that room to force everything else to format accordingly. I really like using the space or the group widget in that way, because it can, even just adding that one element can make an entire section look a lot nicer visually, in terms of how the patient's seeing it when they're filling it out. And if this is running up a little bit close, and you don't necessarily like the 5 and the 3, you can always reformat that top section to a 3 wide section. Or if you just want to add a little bit of space, you can use that page break. That page break widget will also be found just above the group on the formatting tools. Just make sure that when you're using the page break that you do hover over it and click the orange pencil icon, and you manage your toggles here. If you don't want the line to show, you can always just turn off that show line toggle. But the more important one to be aware of is the use as page break toggle. This is always going to be enabled by default. If this is enabled, then whenever the form is printed, all information that follows this widget, we'll leave that line on so we can see it, all the information that follows this widget, so this entire section, will be forced onto a new page. So this will act as a literal page break anytime the form is printed out. So to avoid that and to just use it as a spacer, we can just toggle off that page break. We can take a look at that on our style page. And maybe we don't want all these lines running up, so we'll go ahead and turn off that show line. If you need a little bit more room, you can always duplicate these out, but you can utilize these to give your your forms a little bit more room to breathe and to more clearly define those sections. All right. Now we have these 2 sections set up as single select option sections. So these are going to be your typical yes or no questions. You can also save a little room if you want to use a single widget format for these questions, whereas these are all multiple elements asking various questions with answer selections of their own. You can set this up as a multi-checkbox or a multi-select option as well. If you prefer the way that these look, the multi-select option will work very well for you. But the multiple checkboxes will function very much the same. It will have some added functionality that will give it access to the column functionality, but we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. Let's go ahead and add some fields here just so we can see. And maybe we'll add 10 for this section and 10 for this one as well. Okay. Just to clear our area, we won't need this one anymore, but we can see how these will differ with the same amount of questions. So our multi-select option will automatically try to save you the most amount of space, as it's just going to format according to how long your question, or your answer choices are. So it will just format all the way up on top of one another. You can see we can fit 11 in here, right, or 10 right here, right now. 11 total on that first line. We're going to leave it at 10 though, just for consistency with the others. But when we open that up for editing, we will have the toggles available at the top, required, which we can make required. It will automatically align left whenever added to the form, but if you want that information to align right, typically these would mainly be used with a text field aligned right to be an initials column or initials field or something like that. But you can align every element to the right if you prefer. You can hide it on anytime the form is printed out, or hide it from the user. If this one's toggled on, the patient will not see this question whenever they're sent the form. So any staff only information or any information that you don't want the patient to see, you can always just toggle those widgets on with that hide from user toggle, and it will hide it from the patient. But we do not have any formatting options. It will simply just build out to however many options that you have or answer choices, and it will the answer boxes will grow to however large your answer is. If we go to our multi-check boxes, we can open that up. We'll have the same toggles, except we'll also have a show as columns toggle. The show as columns toggle will toggle on the column functionality. From here, we can reformat this information to however many we would like per row, up to 9. So if you would like to cram all of them in there, if they're only one-word answers, then you can save a lot of space that way. But you can also format this a little bit, nicer. I prefer the multi-check boxes just because visually, I think the check boxes look very nice. And I like the column functionality. But we can go ahead and go over to our style page and just take a look at what those will look like. But you can see the multiple checkboxes and the multi-select options. While it might not look, that big of a difference, it will save you more room on those forms. And if you are looking to cut down those print pages when you are printing out the forms or exporting those forms or the submissions, that can make the difference of a page or not. So these are the 3 ways that I would build out a section like this. Now, one note here, if you do have a section with conditional information, and I always do like to point this out, I talk about this a lot in these webinars whenever we talk about selection styles, but when it comes to conditional information, that can determine the style that you use. So if we have our multiple checkboxes up here at the top, we can add a few conditional fields to this, and we'll just add them to the first 3, simulating a question that would ask something like "please explain," or maybe asking for the type of a type of ailment, right? Maybe like cancer or diabetes, and then you need to know the type that they've had. So there would be an additional question following that answer. So we'll add that to the first 3 here as well. And then we're going to add some to our initial section. And again, we will just do the first 3. Except for this one, I will also do this one in the middle. All right. And I have just been dragging and dropping elements into the answer area, the open area beneath each answer selection. That will just be the conditional information. Whenever you open that question back up, it will not be displayed. We can look at it on this one. Will not be displayed. It will instead say show conditional fields. You'll just need to click that to open it up, but you can put as much information in here as you like. This will be an unformatted area, much like the blank area of the form itself, where you can add columns. You can format within this as well. We'll keep it simple today just by using that one extra element, but I do want to display or demonstrate how these are going to display for you. Okay, so we'll go over to our style page because our style page is a live preview of our form, meaning we can select and sign and type and all of that good stuff. But if we select our option 1, we get that text field for the additional information. We'll select option 2 and our second text field and our third one. Now, they will stack on top of each other. So if all 10 of these answer selections have conditional information, and all are selected, there will be 10 text fields taking up that full width, each all the way down. So you will if you are going to use this style, and that won't be a huge problem for you, you will want to make sure to label these accordingly. So if the first option was cancer, I would have its information say type of cancer. The next one was diabetes, type of diabetes, so on and so forth. So the patient knows which one they're answering, because you don't want them to accidentally unclick something and it adds something else, or remove something and it all just says explain. They might not know which one they're answering for. Same will go for the multi-select options. And the reason for this is because these are both single widgets with multiple answer selections. So the conditional information will be presented beneath the parent widget, so the parent question. And so very much the same for our multi-select options. So we have those first three, and it's displaying the exact same as our multiple checkboxes. So in this case, if you are going to have a section that all of that is going to have conditional information, I absolutely recommend the yes, no style, or you could also use the single checkboxes as well for this. But the reason for that is because these will all be individual elements, meaning that conditional information is going to be presented directly beneath that question. So when we start to click these, it will keep it nice and tight, nice and formatted. We can also click this one down here. So you can see that it will be very clear to the patient as to which question that additional information is coming from, but it will also look a lot nicer for you on the tail end of that when you export that information out, especially on the printed version of the form. Anytime the form is printed out as a blank PDF to be filled out in Office or anything like that, all conditional information is going to be presented on that printout. Unless it's been hidden on print, then it will all be displayed, meaning that when you print that form out, if all 10 of these had additional information, then you would have your question, 10 text fields, all in this format, and then your next question. If this one was the same, another 10 text fields, and then our third section. This one, however, would be just this large right here, because all of those additional questions would be right up underneath each one of those questions, and it will look a lot nicer for you on that printed version. And especially on a printed version, you will definitely need to make sure that you're labeling them accordingly if you are going to use the multi-checkbox or multi-select style. However, if you're using the single select option style or the single checkboxes, then it will be a lot more clear for your patients and for your staff whenever they're going through that information on the tail end. All right, we'll go back to the builder. Oh, time is flying by. I'm going to go ahead and open up that chat if we do have any questions, or if I can go over anything that may be helpful for you. Please get those in. I'm more than happy to answer those. The chat is open. In the meantime, we can go back to our information tab, which is on our first page, and this is going to be a single checkbox style. So we can see how that's going to look. We can update that as well. Maybe we want to do 5 wide here, and we want to format our last 2 options. So we can go back to that group, add our group in, and just duplicate this as many times as needed. And now our last 2 options will take up that remaining area. For this one, though, I would prefer a 4 wide column just because I think that looks a lot nicer and will look a lot nicer for the patient. We can get rid of our groups. Now, when it comes to the group tool, it can also be used and is primarily used for moving large groups of information. So we can move all of this information as a whole in our column. Right? We can move this as one element by just moving that column element. If we use the arrows, we can move it up or down on that page. If we wanted to move this information to to another tab, we can open up the column of all of those elements and use that move tool. So we'll use the move drop down to select our medical history, and then we'll make sure to click move. From here, it will be added to the bottom of that tab that you've added to. And then you'll just need to either click and drag the column as a whole, which if you are going to be doing that, I don't recommend clicking within because you'll grab one of the elements. You'll just want to click between that arrow, whether it's the top arrow or the bottom arrow, and the corner of the column. So anywhere in here, we click, we can drag that whole group of that information. And then I can just use my mouse scroll wheel to scroll on up the page, and we can place that at the top of the page. Now, let's go ahead and move that back for just a moment. So we'll send it back to our information tab, and we will move this entire group of information as a whole instead. And to do that, we're going to use that group tool. So to keep everything together, we can place our group. And the group is going to be an unformatted area, so it will not format. If we had multiple widgets in here, they will just stack on top of each other as if they were not in a column. So you can put columns into groups and format in there as well. But we'll go ahead and we'll just place each one of these in as the order that it was in on the page currently. And when you're dragging a large group in, this is kind of a good time to talk about this. When you're dragging a large or a column of a large group, it can be kind of unclear when it actually goes into that into that group widget. All you're going to want to do, excuse me, is look at the three dots right that replace here, or replace the orange pencil icon. Those three dots, the middle one is going to be your point of contact, right? So once that middle dot crosses over the line, it has now been in the group. And we'll move our medications question up there as well as our pain question. Now, to move all of this as one unit, much like we did with our column here with all of our single checkboxes, we can grab that group tool, again, anywhere from that top arrow to the corner or that bottom arrow to the corner, somewhere in that blank space, and we can move this entire section as its own group now. Which means that we can move all of this over to another tab if we like, or we can move this entire question up to the very top of the page if we want that to be more prevalent on that page whenever the patient gets there. But you can move it all as a group. This will save you a lot of time, honestly, whenever you are moving things, because if you're moving them individually, you'll have to send it over to the other tab, click back to this tab, send the next one over to that new tab, come back to this tab to grab this one, so on and so forth. Where here we can go click on our orange pencil icon, use that move tool, send it to our medical history tab, and all of that information is now on the tab that it needs to be on. We'll go ahead and move this all to the top. And there we go. Then we can maybe we'll take our title away because we have a section that already starts us off. But that group tool can be very, very useful, not only for moving things around in your packet, but also too whenever you are printing forms. If you find yourself with a very large group, maybe a group like this, we'll just duplicate this out a whole bunch of times. But maybe you have a group with 40 or 50 questions in it, a column with 40 or 50 questions in it. Sometimes, as those will be part of one widget, it will try to keep that information together. So if most of this information, or if this information, I should say, takes up most of that first page, then maybe this will all get pushed to the second page and you'll be left with a large blank space. If you find yourself in a situation where that's happening, what I would recommend doing is just breaking down these columns into smaller groups. So maybe you just break this one down and you drag the first 10 questions into it and you format those 10 questions into a 5-wide column, like so. Computer's going haywire right now. There we go. And maybe instead of one large group, you have multiple small groups of columns that will print much more cleanly, and that way you'll at least have this bit on that first page, and then the next on the next page, and so on and so forth. But if you're having printing issues where you're having large spaces of no information on a page before it goes to the next page, you can always double check what's going on there by making sure that there's no page breaks with that page break widget or page break toggle enabled, because that will be forcing that information to the next page. Or it's probably because there's a column with too much information, and at that point I would just recommend breaking that down a little bit. And then at that point too, if it's all too jammed up together, you can always add those page breaks in to use as the spacers on the live version. All right. Oh, insert the company logo, name, address, and contact info. So for that, that would kind of depend on how you wanted to present that information. Say, for instance, if you wanted the logo and contact information and address and all of that to be on the actual form, I would just recommend placing you would use an image widget to upload your logo, which I can upload now. So maybe we upload our logo, and then we can update the size of that. I have uploaded a humongous file, of course, so even the small size is big, but you can make this as large or small as needed. But we can have our logo here, and if we wanted the address and contact information to be beneath our logo, we can just go ahead and add our paragraph tool beneath that logo. We can add our address, phone, email, just to simulate. And then maybe I'll bold that. We can center that using the formatting here, and we can have that information beneath it. Or if you want that to be on the same row, you can use a column up here as well. So we can place a column at the top. We can pull our logo into that column, and then we can have our address, phone, and email. We can have it set up that way. And then from here, if you want to reformat this, you can right align this information. If you want it to be on the right side of the form, we can left align our logo over here if we want that to be on the left, just depending on how you want that information to be displayed. But I would use a paragraph widget to display that information on the actual form, and then the logo you can just use that image file for. You'll make sure that you don't want to use the drawing tool for it, because the drawing tool, which can be seen it's now on our medical history, but the drawing tool will allow you to upload an image, and then the patient will be able to draw on it. So you obviously don't want them to deface your logo. So I definitely recommend using the image widget for any images that are on the form, as they will simply just be images. The patient won't be able to do anything with that. But if you want to update the logo that's at the top left, that's on the live version, on the web version, and everything like that, what we can do is we can go to the style page for that, and that will be your second option in the header section up here. So that will be the logo file. If you want to update this, we can clear that out, search for a new one. You'll be able to upload any image file here, and then you'll be good to go. You can upload the size of that as well. And so you'll also have some styling options over here. If we wanted to update our bottom bar color to maybe separate with a red, we could do that. Background color will be in its own section. If you do know that specific hex key, you can enter that information into that space there, or you can just use the color picker to slide around and find something that looks good with your logo. And then, of course, all the content and everything here. If you would like more information on these options or anything like that, especially when it comes to building as well, you can always go back to my account. You can go to my account, support, and search guide. And then once you're in the product guide homepage, you can go to the building forms section, and we'll have a section on styling down here at the bottom, talking about updating font, those body styles, what they'll do, how to update them, things like that. Our product guide can answer many, many questions. Do recommend coming to check this out, especially for building forms, but also just for general account use, sending forms, how to update users, set up integrations or bulk exporting or something like that as well. Oh, yes. The paragraph widget is simply, sorry, and the questions, can I use a paragraph to write a description of information? Yes, the paragraph widget is simply a text editor. So once we add that in there, we can take a look at that. We can drag our paragraph. You can use this for as a title, a section header. You can have an entire consent form, which I would recommend using this for any paragraph type information. So you can use this as a consent form or whatever the case may be. You'll be able to format that information, bold it, italicize it, put it into lists, whatever the case may be. And we'll also have some preset heading styles as well that you can use that will increase the size and look of those titles. Anyway, you can also link or hyperlink in here. You can add images in here as well. So maybe you just want to add that logo directly into the paragraph. You can absolutely do that, just depending on how you want to utilize that. But you can get very creative in here. Also, the paragraph tool will allow you to autofill information into it, which is kind of a more detailed topic, but just to kind of give you an idea of what it can do. We can add a couple of brackets. We can add first name, end bracket, last name, end bracket. And these two shortcodes, I'm just going to give a very, very quick overview on this, but I would like to show you the functionality of what you can get with the paragraph widget. We can add our paragraph. Let's do this. We'll add it just underneath our patient name. But the patient name has set shortcodes, which I just entered into those brackets in that paragraph widget, the first name and last name. We won't be able to change these. These communicate with the database as to what name to store that information under, but just to use that as a demonstration. You can also do this with any of the shortcodes from anything else. So for this one, it's set as address, city, state, and zip. We can let's have a little fun with it. Let's go. Address, city, state, zip. All right, and all of these are in brackets, not parentheses. And so we can see here that it's autofilling with the pre-filled information from these from the placeholders. So if we go next to style, as soon as this information is filled out, it will autofill into that paragraph widget. And then we can get our address in there, city, the moon, test, whatever. But you can absolutely have information autofilled into a paragraph, which can also be hidden from the patient. So you can have it autofill with selections made by them, things like that, into like kind of a little mini paragraph, maybe a soap notes or something like that. So depending on your creativity, you can get really, really deep with that paragraph widget. Of course, and if you would like also to, at that guide page as well, we have our FormDr update section. If you wanted to go back through our webinar schedules, for instance, the March webinar schedule was all about the widgets in the builder. We have these videos posted, so you can go back through and watch these at your leisure. But in the March one specifically, we went through each widget in the builder and what they can do and how to use them. And we do get into this autofill information as well. So please feel free to go back through our previously recorded webinars, as they will be very helpful when it comes to building forms. But thank you all very much for joining us today. We are all out of time, and that will conclude this webinar. But please feel free to join us again in the future. And if you have any staff or coworkers that would like to learn this information, absolutely send them our way. These are all free, and we encourage everyone to join us as often as they like. But thank you again, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.